Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Basics, a reference guide for mathematics. This is episode 8, multiplying positive and negative numbers. We're going to start by discussing what it means to multiply. Then we're going to look at multiplying on a number line, and then multiplying by groups, and we're going to look at the rules of multiplying and ways to help you remember them. What is multiplication but repeated adding? Adding the same number over and over again. So 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 over and over again, multiple times. That's where the term times come from, like 3 times 4 is because 3 happens 4 times or multiple times. Look at this using rules. Rules really work for some people, and they are a great way to help you remember what the answer should be. With multiplying, your multiplication stays the same. 3 times 2 is 6, whether it's 3 times positive 2, 3 times negative 2, it's still going to be 6. The negatives only change the polarity of your answer, so it will only change it to positive or negative. Rule number 1, if you're multiplying two factors with the same signs. So if you have 3 times 2, they have the same sign, they're both positive. That's positive 6. And if you have negative 3 times negative 2, those are both negative, they have the same sign, so it's positive 6. So one rule you could think of is multiplying two factors with the same signs yields a positive product. What if you're multiplying two factors with opposite signs, like negative 3 times 2 and 3 times negative 2? Well, both of those answers are negative. Negative 6 on both of them. Multiplying factors with opposite signs yields a negative product. That is sometimes the rules I use, but I prefer the rules on these next pages because when you get higher up in math, you will have things like exponents, more than two factors multiplied each time. So you need to start to kind of expand that thought. What if there's more than two? If they're all negative, does it make it positive? Let's look at that. An even number of negative factors. So we're looking at odds and evens this time. Evens are things like 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, so on and so forth. 3 times 2 is 6. Well, there aren't any negative factors there. That's right. 0 is an even number. And negative 3 times 2 is also positive 6 because it has two negative factors and 2 is also an even number. Both of those have positive products because multiplying an even number of negative factors yields a positive product. What about odd? Well, you've probably already guessed it. If you have an odd number of negative factors, like negative 3 times 2 and positive 3 times negative 2, both of those answers are negative. So there was only one negative factor. One is an odd number, so your answer is negative. Multiplying an odd number of negative factors yields a negative product. These rules come alive more so when you have more than two factors that you're dealing with. Let's take a look at that. Once again, we're looking at an even number of negatives, but this time we have more than two factors. So here we've got 4 factors, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, and negative 1. All 4 are negative. That's an even number of negative factors, so the answer is positive. Here's how it works. Negative 3 times negative 2, that's positive 6. Positive 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. Negative 6 times that last negative 1 is positive 6, because a negative times a negative is a positive. What about exponents? You remember exponents. It does not mean negative 3 times 2. It means negative 3 times negative 3. 2 negative 3s is what it means. 2 is an even number. So negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Negative 3 to the 4th power is negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. Again, you have 4 negative factors, meaning your answer is positive 81. Here's some examples of odd number of negative signs. So if only one of your factors is negative, then your answer is negative. And if you have 3 factors that are negative, because 3 also is an odd number. Negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. Positive 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. Negative 3 to the 1st power means you have only one negative 3 as a factor, so it's negative 3. Negative 3 to the 3rd power means you have negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, so you have 3 negative factors. That's going to give your answer a negative answer because negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. Positive 9 times negative 3 is negative 12. 27. So again, multiplying an even number of negative factors yields a positive product, and multiplying an odd number of negative factors yields a negative product. Let's get that written in our notes. This time I'm going to show you our third model, which is kind of embedded in our notes for the rules, and that's the model of patterns. So if you look here, the pattern is the 2, the 1, and the 0. And then you have 6, 3, 0. Your products are going down by 3 as that second factor is going down by 1. What do you suppose the next equation would be? That's right, 3 times negative 1. Well, we can use the other products to figure out what the next answer in that pattern would be. 6, 3, 0. We have to go 3 below 0. And that's going to be negative 3. So there you can see the finished work of that pattern. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. That's why a positive times a negative is a negative, which we've already proven 2 other times. So now I took that last one, 3 times negative 2 equals negative 6, and I'm going to start another pattern in the next column. Here's this pattern. This time the first factor is going down by 1 each time. The next equation in the sequence is going to be negative 1 times negative 2, because you have 3, 2, 1, 0. 1 below 0 is negative 1. So now we have a negative times a negative. But look at what's happening to the products. Negative 6, negative 4, negative 2, 0. Is that going up or down? Be careful. They're negative. Think of them as temperatures. If the temperature went from negative 6 to negative 4, did it go up or did it go down? It went up. It went up by 2 because they're negative. So they're already below 0. So when you get to a smaller negative, you're actually going higher. So to figure out what negative 1 times negative 2 is, we have to go 2 higher than 0, and that's 2. And here I went a little bit further on that one. In these two patterns, I have illustrated all of the rules for multiplying integers. The first one you already knew. Positive times a positive is a positive. All of those are right there in the first pattern. But then notice I didn't box the 3 times 0 is 0. I could have boxed the 3 because it is positive, but 0 is not positive, nor is it negative. So I didn't box it at all. If you look at that equation that I did box, you have 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. That's an illustration of our next rule, that a positive times a negative is a negative. And you can reverse that and say a negative times a positive is also a negative because of the commutative property. And those are all here. And then if you go beyond the 0 times negative 2, you have a negative 1 times a negative 2 equaling a positive 2. And that's an illustration of the last rule, that a negative times a negative is a positive. Those are our 3 rules for multiplying integers. Those are the ways that you can remember it. Either a positive times a positive is a positive times negative is negative, negative times negative is positive, or you could remember the even and odd rule. If you have an even number of negative factors, your answer is positive. If you have an odd number of negative factors, your answer is negative. Here's what my notes look like finished. You can add color and designs as you like to make your pages happy. Or if you like them plain and clean, you can do that as well because it's your notebook. Writing in your notebook is to help you remember things. And writing things down, just the act of writing it down, is a great memory tool. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.